Ah, the fabled push. If you are a WWE star, you most certainly want one, as a push equals television time, pay-per-view matches, merchandise, and, well, everything that can help make that performer more cash. How disappointing it must feel then when a planned major push is cancelled before it can truly get going. It has happened many times before and for a variety of different reasons. And oftentimes when that push gets kiboshed, the unfortunate superstar never fully recovers. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 WWE stars who had their huge pushes cancelled. Join us. Number 10, Mordecai. Kevin Furtig was originally in a developmental territory tag team with Tyson Tomko and believed that their duo was his ticket to the main roster, when Vince McMahon informed them both that he didn't care about tag teams, shock horror, and needed single stars instead. And so Furtig was repackaged as Mordecai, the all-white pale rider who debuted after weeks of vignettes hyping his impending arrival. Mordecai got to squash some geeks and was reportedly being built up for feuds with The Undertaker and then WWE champion Eddie Guerrero when he was abruptly taken off of television following a loss to Rey Mysterio just days after Mordecai had beaten Hardcore Holly at the Great American Bash pay-per-view. Furtig was sent back to OVW, where he reverted to his former Seven persona and completely changed his appearance. It would later be revealed that Furtig had gotten into a bar fight around this time that resulted in legal action heading his and WWE's way, thus the sudden end to his push. He was released in 2005, then brought back a year later as the vampiric Kevin Thorne, but the big push would continue to elude him. Number 9, Eva Marie. One of the most divisive wrestlers in recent memory, Eva Marie has seldom received praise for her in-ring work, which was always a couple of 100 miles behind her contemporaries, but she was considered a future megastar due to her look and ability to generate heat. After a time in NXT and following a brief hiatus, Eva was brought back to the main roster as part of the 2016 draft and positioned as the top female heel on SmackDown. She spent several weeks making excuses in order to back out of actually having to compete, riling up the babyface side of the Blue brand leading into SummerSlam, where Marie was going to have to actually, well, you would assume, wrestle as part of a planned 6-person tag. Days before the pay-per-view, however, she was slapped with a 30-day suspension for violating the company's wellness policy, with Nikki Bella replacing her at SummerSlam. There was no coming back for All Red Everything, who it was thought may have been in line to become the first ever SmackDown Women's Champion not too long after. Her push was cancelled and she was later released after months of inactivity. Number 8, CM Punk. The summer of 2009 felt like the time where CM Punk properly cemented himself as a main event player in WWE. He had won the World Heavyweight Championship from Jeff Hardy, the two having a brilliant series that culminated in the straight-edge superstar winning a loser leaves WWE match. Now a full-on heel and displaying a swagger that simply wasn't there when he reigned as champ the first time a year before, Punk looked good value for a long reign with the big gold belt. How odd then when he dropped it in his second pay-per-view defense inside Hell in a Cell against The Undertaker. It took the dead man only 10 minutes to end Punk's 42-day reign in the show's opener, after which he dropped down the card. By the time TLC rolled around 2 months after the title switch, the Second City Saint was staring at the ceiling for R-Truth in the dark match. The reported reason for Punk's push being halted was his apparent refusal to dress nicer during an overseas tour and directly questioning the logic behind the request to SmackDown's locker room leader. Number 7, Mark Gindrak. On paper, Mark Gindrak had all of the tools to succeed in sports entertainment. Tall, handsome, and athletically gifted, the WCW power plant graduate was a young physical specimen just waiting for his break while toiling in WWE's developmental territories in the early 2000s. He no doubt believed that he was about to get it when he and Randy Orton were chosen to join a Four Horsemen type group alongside Ric Flair and Triple H. Pegged as the prospective fourth member of Evolution, WWE even went to the trouble of shooting vignettes featuring Gindrak in the stable, though he would end up being replaced by Dave Bautista before they aired. The game has gone on record as saying he didn't believe that Gindrak had the maturity needed for such a big spot, even though Vince McMahon wanted him to be a member. Gindrak and Orton were believed to be bad influences on one another, and it was felt that they would ultimately be the downfall of the group if kept together. The former WCW Tag Champion would not get the main event push he longed for and was put in a mid-card tag team match with Garrison Cade as a consolation. Number 6, Mohamed Hassan. Mark Kapani had only been in the business for a couple of years, training in WWE's feeder farm, Ohio Valley Wrestling, when he was plucked from developmental and thrown onto the main roster with a controversial gimmick and a huge push. In about 8 months on television, Mohamed Hassan got to work with everyone from Mick Foley and Shawn Michaels to Steve Austin and Hulk Hogan, and was in the middle of a program with The Undertaker when his run came to an unforeseeable end. Hassan had been involved in an angle with terroristic overtones on the episode of SmackDown that happened to air on July 7th, 2005, the same day as the London bombings. SmackDown's network UPN were aghast with the scenes and the negative media reaction that resulted from the angle, and demanded that WWE remove Mohamed from their program immediately. Seeing no viable alternative, WWE essentially killed off the character in his Great American Bash grudge match with the Deadman, sent him back to developmental for a short time, and then released him. Had things been different, there was talk that Hassan would beat Batista for the World Heavyweight title at SummerSlam a month later. Number 5, Test. There were a few occasions where it looked like WWE were going to hand Andrew Martin the big push and propel him to the main event level. It was teased during his romance with Stephanie McMahon and subsequent feuds with Shane and Triple H, and then again following the WCW and ECW invasion. In early 2003, WWE were looking to try again, turning Test face, changing up his look, and giving him real-life girlfriend Stacy Keibler as his manager. And who could forget the hilarious Testicles marketing campaign? Hopefully everyone. Heading into the No Way Out pay-per-view, Test was booked in a big singles match with Chris Jericho. However, the match was changed just mere days before, with Jeff Hardy being booked against Y2J instead, after Test and Keibler had failed to make it to the Go-Home Raw. Management had advised them to alter their travel plans in order to avoid a major snowstorm, but the couple didn't heed their warnings and ended up missing the show, resulting in them receiving major heat from the office. The show needed to be rewritten without them, and Test's planned push was scrapped as part of his penance. Number 4, Rob Van Dam. The ill-fated invasion storyline gave wrestling fans little to celebrate, but the emergence of Rob Van Dam on the big stage was like a breath of fresh air for those that wanted new, young, and different stars. RVD was the big success story of the whole affair and very quickly separated himself from the rest of the pack. When he wasn't doing his best to elevate the Hardcore Championship, the whole flipping show could often be found in main events against top stars like Kurt Angle, The Rock, and Steve Austin. Van Dam was incredibly over and having some of the best matches of his life, leading some to think that he should be pushed to the very top and perhaps be given a run with the company's main prize. But right as it looked like it could happen, RVD was disappointingly shunted down the card. For years after, he would struggle to get to the top level, a consequence of his refusal to play the political game, as well as some higher-ups feeling like he was unreliable due to his love of that sticky, icky green. Number 3, Lars Sullivan. Just how do you go from receiving the monster push and being primed for potential pay-per-view matches with John Cena and Brock Lesnar to being forced to pay a $100,000 fine before getting released in infamy? That is a question for Lars Sullivan, who exploded onto the main roster by attacking legends like Kurt Angle, the Hardy Boys, and Rey Mysterio, and looked set for a main event run before a series of events completely derailed his WWE career. First, a slew of disgraceful online forum posts that he had made years earlier were made public, some of which were directed at WWE employees and were made while he was employed by the company. That landed him the massive fine and a trip to sensitivity training, but he wouldn't be able to wrestle anyway after sustaining a serious knee injury not long after. While he was recuperating, adult films he had starred in years earlier surfaced online, adding to his embarrassment and amplifying management's mistrust. He returned over a year later and continued to look dominant, but soon disappeared. Sullivan then requested and received his release, claiming anxiety issues were preventing him from performing, and he now looks to be done with the business. Number 2, Tensai. Matt Bloom had experienced a couple of false dawns in WWE the first time around before he was released in late 2004. He'd spent the next almost 8 years rehabbing his reputation in the Far East, where he was one of the top foreigners for New Japan. Looking for a new monster to feud with John Cena, Bloom got the call to return to WWE, not as A-Train though, but as a new character inspired by his time in the land of the rising sun. He scored the requisite squash match victories over geeks like Alex Riley and Yoshitatsu before bagging big wins against Cena and CM Punk. Just when it looked like WWE might put him in a proper feud with the face that runs the place, he was pinned on Raw by Cena, kicking off a sudden and spectacular fall from grace. The Tensai character simply wasn't landing as WWE had hoped, and the company decided to cut bait before investing further money and TV time in pushing it. Within weeks, he was putting over Tyson Kidd and Sin Cara, his career only really regaining any sort of momentum when he formed a babyface tag team with Brodus Clay. Number 1, Lex Luger. With Hulk Hogan departing in the summer of 1993, Vince McMahon knew that he needed a fresh, true blue, muscle-bound American hero to take the Golden Goose's place. And who better than Lex Luger, the clean-cut, hard-bodied bloke with the blonde hair and blue eyes. Repackaged from his heelish narcissist persona and turning face by body-slamming that darned foreign menace Yokozuna on the USS Intrepid on the goddamn 4th of July, Luger had a red, white and blue rocket strapped to his sculpted glutes from the get-go. There was seemingly no stopping the Lex Express, but Luger failed to win the WWE title on 2 major occasions, at SummerSlam 1993 and WrestleMania 10. Despite being Vince McMahon's preferred babyface type at the time, the truth is that Luger never really connected with the fans on the same level that his 1994 Royal Rumble co-winner Bret Hart did. The boss ended up going with the Hitman in the end, choosing Bret as the one to finally unseat Yokozuna. The total package then fell down the card and out of the title picture.